Hello everyone, and welcome to the November edition of the Farmer Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. Well, I hate to have to give a harvest update this late in the year. We're taping on November 7th, and this harvest is just dragging out incredibly long. It's really been a tough one. We've talked about it, some in September, some in October, and thought, well, last month I said, well, hopefully we'll be done by the next program. But it has really gotten worse and gotten very, very serious, if it wasn't serious already. Of course, all caused by rainy weather. September, and I mentioned this last month, September we had 12 days with rain in it. October we had 13 days with rain in it. And we're taping on November 7th, and we've had 6 out of the 7 days at least. I wasn't sure about one of those days. We may have had some very early in that day that I missed, but 6 out of 7 days. Looking at the forecast, we've probably got 1 or 2 more rainy days before this hopefully will dry out for maybe a little bit. It's still unknown, but at least we've got maybe a little bit of break after that. We'll see and hope that it does happen. But harvest is just again, a lot of stuff still in the field. Soybeans, a lot of soybeans in the field. Looking at the statewide report, I think it says we're about 72% done. Of course, that takes into account the whole state. Normally the south part of the state is going to be ahead of the north, so we're probably not that far along. A lot of beans left in the field, and they say rice statewide is 97% complete. Up here there's still a little bit of rice in the field as well. Not a lot of rice, but if you've got some, it's a lot to you, and there's still a lot of guys with some rice in the field. Quality wise, everything's going downhill. Rice milling yields have really suffered. We've been wet and dry, and continuous wetting and drying really hurts milling on rice, so that's been a big factor. And we've talked about soybean quality. You've probably heard about that on the news, but with all the rain, the soybean quality is going downhill as well. We also have some yield losses just simply because it's so hard to harvest it when it's muddy like this and the conditions aren't good. You have more harvest loss than usual. So again, as I said last month, hopefully we're going to get a good stretch of dry weather. Probably going to be a lot of Thanksgiving, maybe some Thanksgiving dinners eaten on the combine. Probably going to be some turkey sandwiches eaten on the combine this year. And it's kind of joke a little bit about that, but it's really not funny with how this harvest has gone this year. So hopefully things will get better, and they always do at some point, so hopefully things will change. And when I do that December report, hopefully we've got the vast majority of this crop, hopefully all of it, out of the field. My topic this month, I want to talk about rice varieties and hybrids. What I want to talk about, I've got some performance test results in, mainly from the University of Arkansas. I want to talk about some of these results from this past year, some variety characteristics, just some of my own personal thoughts about rice varieties. Talking about the performance trial results, as I look through these results and look at the different varieties, you can almost find a report to fit your variety. I mean, some tests, one variety will stand out over another. The next test, just maybe 50 miles away, it'll be exactly the opposite. So you can find a test to fit the variety you like, and that shows you that most of these are pretty good, but they can vary quite a bit depending on the conditions of that individual location where they're at. I want to really break these reports down into about 6 different components. Talk about conventional long grains, medium grains, conventional clear fields, hybrid clear fields, conventional hybrids, and finally the Previsia herbicide system. Looking at conventional long grains, there's really just one, in my opinion, pretty much just one variety is the game, and that's Diamond. I mentioned in last month's program our conventional varieties were kind of a little bit erratic. We had some outstanding Diamond this past year, well over 200, and then we had some guys that were a little bit disappointed in their Diamond as well. But if you look at the tests and overall the performance of Diamond since it's been released, it's by far, it's the go-to conventional long grain out there and the one we need to be looking at. There'll still be probably a little bit of Lacaste out there, a little bit of Roy J out there, but look at things over the trends over time. I think that Roy J is the variety of choice. It's a good variety, good yielding, a lot of good characteristics. Looking at diseases, probably the only thing that stands out negatively, it's very susceptible to fall smut. We saw some of that this year. You can suppress that fall smut with fungicides. Fall smut, it's not, fungicides aren't as effective on fall smut as they are kernel smut, but you can still get some suppression with that. So, if you're growing this variety, I would certainly look at getting some propiconazole tilt out there to help suppress this, in your fungicide program. Next, medium grains, and really there's 3 medium grains that we look at: Titan, Jupiter, and Clearfield 272. And you'll talk to one guy and you'll look at one test and Titan will be the one. You'll talk to another farmer, look at another test, and Jupiter's the one. So, really both of those varieties can be very good, can really yield very well. You look at the characteristics of the varieties, I think Titan, kind of is a little better, but looking at diseases, looking at lodging, it's a better choice because of some of those things. Jupiter, certainly more prone to lodge. Also is a little more susceptible to some diseases, especially stem rot and to some extent blast. Although we'll see a lot of leaf blast with Jupiter, but it really won't translate to panicle blast that bad. So again, it's kind of a personal preference deal. I lean to Titan just because of those characteristics, of the disease characteristics, the lodging, not as bad for lodging. So I would lean to Titan over Jupiter, but certainly if you like Jupiter, there's certainly nothing wrong with planting it. If you want to plant a medium grain and it's got red rice, and certainly Clearfield 272 is a pretty good choice. Some pretty good yields with 272 this past year. Looking at the test, some very good yields with it. About the only drawback when you look at disease ratings, it is more susceptible to bacterial panicle blight. So in those bad bacterial panicle blight years, it can drag that yield down a little bit. But if it's not a bad bacterial panicle blight year, it's not a real hot summer like that, well, 272 can be right up there with them. So those are your 3 medium grains. Next, the conventional Clearfields. We're really looking at 3 here: 151, 153, 172. 151 is one I always like to see a little bit planted. If you're trying to divide varieties up, I still want some 151 just because of the top end yield potential it has. If you hit with this variety, get it planted early, heavy ground where you can really keep a good flood on it, get your potash levels up high. This variety can hit certain years really, really good and make some outstanding yields, some top end yields. So I just hate not to plant some of that if you need some Clearfield. 153 seen kind of as a replacement for 151. Improved disease characteristics, not as much lodging with it, so it's very big improvements in those areas. Yield potential, it's good, and a lot of tests this year I saw it was right with 151, but when you get those top end situations, I don't think it's quite with 151, but it's certainly very good. 172 has some improved standability, also good disease resistance. Its yield potential is not as good as 151 or 153, so probably not going to be as much of that planted, but it is a good variety, just doesn't have quite that high end yield potential. The hybrid Clearfields, Gemini, 7311, 745 are what you have. I kind of like Gemini the best. It had some outstanding yields with it this year. 7311 also pretty close to it in some cases. 745 is the one that's been around forever, and I think Gemini and 7311 are certainly improvements over that, but there'll still be some 745 around out there. Gemini is very susceptible to fall smut, so kind of like the diamond with the Gemini, you probably need to look at a fungicide, which a lot of time we don't with hybrids, but with that fall smut sensitivity, probably be a good idea to get some propiconazole out there in your program. Conventional hybrids, really looking at 2 right now, 753 and 760. The highest yield potential out there, and certainly 753 I think is a little higher than 760, but you'll find some tests where 760 is right with it. So those are the 2 to plant if you're looking at conventional hybrids. And again, top end yield potential here, 753 wins most of the tests that it's in. Looking at 760, it's another one with fall smut sensitivity. So again, if you're planting 760, you would need to think about that tilt application. So those are your conventional hybrids. Finally, Previsia, there's just one variety right now, and that's the PVL01. Certainly doesn't have top end yield potential. We had some pretty decent yields this year, heard some 160 to 170 yields, and a couple of 3 that were quite a bit lower than that. So not top end yield potential. But if you're planting rice in a field that has red rice, and that red rice is resistant to Newpath, Newpath's not going to touch it, well then you need to plant Previsia. There's no doubt about it. It fits in those fields right there, so PVL01 would be a good choice for you. Understand they'll have their next variety release will be in probably a limited amount in 2020, so I'm sure it'll be an improvement in yield potential and some other characteristics. But again, that's your portfolio, you might say, for your rice varieties out there. Try to mix things up. Don't ever just rely on one variety, because you know what can happen. If it's a bad year for that one, then it could, really going to be a bad year for your entire farm. And so try to mix things up a little bit and get some of these different varieties out there, and mix your portfolio up quite a bit. And I think hopefully we'll have a good rice year next year. If you have any questions about rice varieties, feel free to contact me through Farmers Supply Association. My number is 870-318-0739. You can also reach me by email at randyklepechka@gmail.com. And this has been Randy Klepechka with your November Farmers Supply Association Agriculture Report.